I am your host, Robert Rowe, and you are listening to Awake Radio.
Today is May 2nd, 2013. Before we begin today, I would like to welcome our newest listeners to the Awake Radio family. In addition to Awareness Act Social Network, Awake Radio can now be heard on preppingblog.com and Transegoist Daily Journal website. Welcome to you all, and I hope your journey with Awake Radio is a positive and enlightening one. Okay. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion, or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, or abridging the freedom of speech, or of the press, or of the right of the people peaceably to assemble and to petition the government for a redress of grievances. The First Amendment to the Constitution of the United States of America. Section 1. All persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. The 14th Amendment to the United States Constitution. The convention of a number of the states, having at the time of their adoption of the Constitution expressed a desire, in order to prevent misconstruction or abuse of its powers, that further declaratory and restrictive clauses should be added, and as extending the ground of public confidence in the government will best ensure the beneficent ends of its institution. This is the preamble to the Bill of Rights. These three statements from the Bill of Rights and the 14th Amendment to the Constitution most apply to today's topic. President George Washington, President Abraham Lincoln, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt, inventor Thomas Alva Edison, author Agatha Christie. What do all of these people have in common? Besides being dead, that is. They were all homeschooled. These people are all testaments to the value of home-based education. All five of these people agree that it is their home education that gave them the courage and determination to be the successes they were. When considering homeschooling, many people look to these great examples as what their children could be, with the proper guidance and education separate from the cookie-cutter worker-your-own creating programs run by the state. Increasingly, families are turning to homeschooling as their preferred method for educating their children. Homeschooling offers several advantages that traditional brick-and-mortar schools cannot provide. One reason for the increased popularity of homeschooling is individualized teaching and more focused attention because of a better teacher-to-student ratio. Assured safety for the children also accounts for one of the major reasons people homeschool. Homeschooling has increased in popularity dramatically since 1999, when a scant 1.7% of school children were homeschooled. By the year 2012, that number increased to over 4%. Coupled with the fact that homeschooled students tend to perform as much as 37 percentile points better on standardized tests than more traditional students, the case for homeschooling seems almost a slam dunk. But it gets even better. The safety of home education is unparalleled. There just isn't a safer and more nurturing environment to learn in than a child's own home. I mean, the statistics speak for themselves. To date, there have been 0 mass murders like Columbine or Sandy Hook in any homeschooling environment in the United States. Who can argue with that? However, critics and opponents of homeschooling cite that parents are not certified teachers, and they question whether or not they make the best educators. Additionally, challenges such as socialization with peer groups and academic competition are problems that families face when deciding on whether or not to school their children independently of state-run programming facilities. To be sure, homeschooling is not for every family. In many cases, there just isn't the time or the energy or the inclination to perform such a monumental task. In a nation where the family unit is constantly degrading and is considered an antiquated notion, it is not hard to imagine why so few families, relatively speaking, are attempting it. This is the preference of the government, as they wish to ensure their worker drones are educated just enough to perform meaningful work, but not so educated that they begin questioning the system and fomenting rebellion against its tyranny. Until recently, homeschools tended to be religious-based education and administered by a church or other religious organization. However, with the advances of technology and the miracle of the internet, homeschooling has taken on a decidedly more secular look. Virtual schools like Connections Academy and K-12 have developed curriculum more akin to public education for those who are less desirous of providing a faith-based education for their children at home. In the format offered by these virtual schools, the parent takes on the role of a learning coach or tutor, who is supervised by a certified teacher. This allows the parent to give the instruction to the student and still interject their own values and moral teachings rather than the generic and questionable values which teachers of brick-and-mortar schools are forced to indoctrinate their charges. The teacher can offer instruction either via telephone conferencing or by video conferencing over the internet. This gives the student valuable face time with the teacher to ask questions which the parent may not be able to answer, or to receive additional help with a particularly difficult concept. While both methods have some common ground, because, let's face it, 1 + 1 will always equal 2, there are problems with brick-and-mortar schools which homeschoolers like to avoid. Traditional schooling options tend to teach that power only comes from authority, and that those in authority are always right. Questioning authority is to be avoided, and those who do so shall be scorned and ostracized. History is to be written and interpreted by the winners with no regard for the truth. Moral values are subjective except where they conflict with authority. Religion is nice, but really unnecessary, and those who are devout practitioners are to be considered fanatics. Indeed, in the past 3 decades, more time and emphasis has been devoted to these concepts than to the 3 R's. Accordingly, school violence has increased exponentially, sexually transmitted diseases and teen pregnancy amongst high school students is on the rise, and drug use is prevalent even amongst middle school-aged students. Standardized test scores are down as much as 50%. High school dropout rates are increasing and successful graduation rates are dropping. To fix this, the NEA, National Education Association, has implemented the Certificate of Attendance, which means that a student has successfully attended high school for at least 4 years without learning anything. Academic achievements are not the only kind of competition which critics fear homeschooled students may miss out on. Athletics and the arts are also areas of competition which are considered fundamental to a child's development. For example, if, say, Serena and Venus Williams had been homeschooled, they might not have had the opportunities to become the world champion tennis phenoms they are today. The flaw with this theory is this: Venus and Serena were homeschooled. And in spite of that handicap, they managed to become the greatest tennis players in the world. So was professional football star Tim Tebow, professional surfer Bethany Hamilton, Olympic medalist Michelle Kwan, and football star Jason Taylor. All were homeschooled. Actress Hilary Duff counts as one of the many successful celebrities who were homeschooled. Others in the arts and humanities category of homeschooled successes include Jennifer Love Hewitt, Bindi Irwin, the daughter of the late Steve Irwin, all of the Osmond children, news anchor and activist Peter Jennings, and authors Micaiah Holden and Margaret Atwood. But let's face it, anybody can accidentally become a famous celebrity in Hollywood, right? Or maybe somebody might accidentally write a bestseller by mistake. Which means that the more noble and respected professions should be considered. After all, everyone knows that all homeschool children are socially awkward and intellectually underdeveloped and politically inept, as the social media and other programming sources make them out to be. So let's consider this. Is it possible that a homeschooled child of today could have the political savvy of former Secretary of State Dr. Condoleezza Rice? No homeschooled child could achieve the same academic and professional greatness as the leader of the Human Genome Project, Francis Collins. Such students could never be well-adjusted enough as Ben Bolger to become a tenured professor at a prestigious college like the College of William and Mary. And yet all three of these homeschooled children prove the negative assertions wrong. The corporate world also has its examples of homeschooling success stories. There's a small corporation which has some minor success that some of you may have heard about, Prada. That little company began by a homeschooled student, Max Prada. Wikipedia founder Jimmy Wales and WikiLeaks Julian Assange can also be counted among those ranks. The field of law seems to have been infiltrated by home-educated students as well. Some of these professional litigators range from civil rights litigator and activist Reed Colfax, all the way to the highest levels of the Supreme Court. Supreme Court Justice Sandra Day O'Connor was also homeschooled. It would be remiss to leave out the sciences and medical arts. As mentioned previously, the Human Genome Project lead scientist Francis Collins. Additionally, such august people as the 2009 Nobel Prize-winning physicist Dr. Willard S. Boyle and rodeo champ turned veterinarian Jill Dworsky are amongst those who were homeschooled. Now, these are just a few of the myriad examples of home-educated successes. With the increasing numbers of Americans deciding to go the route of homeschooling for their children, it would seem that the future of America is assured and bright. But Attorney General Eric Holder appears to be laying the groundwork for the eradication of homeschooling in America. In a case which is now before the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals, Holder is arguing that the people do not have the fundamental right to choose how best to educate their children. In what began as a political asylum case for a family who chose to homeschool their children in Germany, where such action is illegal, Holder is showing this administration's continued contempt for the American tradition of freedom, in this case, freedom of choice. If the family loses its case, they will be deported back to Germany, where they will face fines, imprisonment, and the confiscation of their children. If the appellate court rules in favor of the Attorney General's assertion, the foundation for outlawing homeschooling in America will have been laid. This would not only jeopardize Americans' rights to choose how to educate their children, it could also put virtual schools like Connections Academy and K-12 out of business, thus accomplishing what the NEA has been attempting to do for years without success. With the success of homeschooled students so prevalent, one has to ask why the government would be opposed to it. The answer is simple. It threatens the established and entrenched system put into place by the ruling elite. They would rather have barely educated and unquestioning worker drones who are content making money for them than they would thinking people who question authority and the status quo. It would not do to have a child from the inner city slums become successful and show others that it's okay to think outside the accepted doctrine given them throughout their formative years. In the preamble to the Bill of Rights, remember that it states from the very beginning the conventions of a number of the states having at the time of their adopting the Constitution expressed a desire, in order to prevent misconstruction or abuse of its powers, that further declaratory and restrictive clauses should be added, and as extending the ground of public confidence in the government will best ensure the beneficent ends of its institution. Note the words declaratory and restrictive clauses. These words were chosen with care and with good reason. Remember, it was the philosophy of the Founding Fathers that government should be immensely, but not totally, restricted, and the people should be completely free with regard to most things. Education at the time of the founding of this nation was conducted in one of four ways, typically. The child was instructed at home, or the child attended a local school which usually consisted of one room for all the children in the town, or the child was apprenticed, or the child was instructed in an academy setting, which is where most of the wealthy people typically educated their children. The Founding Fathers could not have possibly conceived the level of technology we have achieved today. They could not have possibly conceived the level of corruption our government has achieved today. If they had, they would have added an education clause to the amendment to the Constitution. To them, education was a non-issue because it was a foregone conclusion that all parents wanted the best possible education for their children, and they would choose the best option with which to achieve this goal. Had they understood the level of moral decay this country would experience in a short 200 years, they may have decided to place greater restrictions on government with regard to their approach to mass education. The fight for control of the minds of this nation's children is nothing new. It has been going on for over 160 years. The Supreme Court has never ruled specifically on the homeschooling issue. However, it has supported the fundamental right of parents to homeschool through its rulings regarding side issues related to homeschooling. For example, in 1925, the court ruled against the state of Oregon's law, which prohibited private schools, saying that a state may not prohibit a parent from satisfying a compulsory attendance requirement by sending their children to private school. In the case of Runyon v. McCrary, the court held that while a state may posit educational standards, it may not preempt the educational process by requiring children to attend public schools. Additionally, in Meyer v. Nebraska, the U.S. Supreme Court's majority opinion stated that the liberty protected by the Due Process Clause, without a doubt, denotes not merely freedom from bodily restraint, but also the right of the individual to contract, to engage in any of the common occupations of life, to acquire useful knowledge, to marry, to establish a home and bring up children, to worship God according to the dictates of his own conscience, and generally to enjoy those privileges long recognized as essential to the orderly pursuit of happiness by free men. That quote was taken directly from Wikipedia, by the way. Here is my opinion for the one or two of you who may actually care. Currently, homeschooling is legal in all 50 states in America. In spite of this fact, the support of the Supreme Court guaranteeing fundamental rights of parents to homeschool their children, the government incessantly attacks this issue in its never-ending battle for complete dominance and control over the minds of the people in general and of the children specifically. This is evident by the backdoor attempt by Attorney General Eric Holder to force the courts to reverse its past precedents and declare that homeschooling is not a fundamental right. From the position of the ruling elite and their puppets, the government, it is not in their best interest to have certain elements of our current society changed. For example, it is not acceptable to consider television as a recreation to be used only occasionally. It is not acceptable to consider that gadgets and toys are also powerful tools which can change societies. It is not acceptable to challenge the status quo, especially when that challenge is taken up against large corporations or government agencies. After all, if the people began thinking for themselves and taking responsibility for themselves, they would soon realize their slavery and strive to relieve themselves of the shackles of debt and political tyranny. I'm Robert Rowe, and I hope you've enjoyed today's show. If you have any questions or comments about this topic, you may email me at rrowe@awarenessact.com. That's rrowe@awarenessact.com. You may also leave me a message on my Awareness Act page or send me a private message. If you are interested in homeschooling your children, I highly recommend Connections Academy. I have personally enjoyed our experience with their virtual school. Their teachers and staff are very professional. The school goes out of its way to ensure that there are various activities and field trips for the students to participate in and have the opportunity to socialize with their own peer groups. Their academic curriculum is on par with most public schools and is accepted by most states. Connections Academy is not affiliated with Awake Radio in any manner, and this is an unsolicited comment and opinion.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streamed.